Just a disclaimer before we begin, this game was given to me by the lovely people at Scallywag Arcade. Shoutouts to Niall from Scallywag who wanted a personal shoutout. Even though I was given a review copy of this game, all opinions shared are my own. That being said, let's get into the video. Good morning, gamers! My name is Lambo. If you know me, you know I have a place in my heart for game shows. Shows like Survivor, The Amazing Race, and even Total Drama Island have fascinated me from a young age. And the rabbit hole doesn't end there, because I would go on to make my own versions of some of these shows in the game Minecraft. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I truly believe that the Minecraft versions of these shows are the best video game adaptations of the shows in question. You feel like you're truly playing them, which can make for some very immersive experience. Compare that to something like Survivor on the Wii, and the difference is night and day. Generally, video game adaptations of game shows have felt like shovelware to me. It's like they're made for people who would say, "Wow, I've heard of Jeopardy!" before they go and spend $30 on a mediocre trivia game. These games are made without much love put into them. You're not going to see Jeff Probst himself personally advertising Survivor for the Wii. So the question becomes, are there any video game adaptations of game shows that can break the mold and actually be good? Now, you might be saying that you love the games that I have already mentioned because you love the shows, and hey, more power to you. After all, that same effect is why I have been looking forward to Taskmaster VR. Ever since I had seen the video of Joe Wilkinson throwing a potato into a hole while barely touching the red-green, Taskmaster had me hooked. So much so that I made a Minecraft version of Taskmaster. Because of that, it's safe to say that I have a decent understanding of how the game works. However, I've always had this experience through the eyes of the Taskmaster and not as a contestant. I've never known what it's like to have my hopes and dreams be struck down by the hand of God. And suddenly, an advertisement for Taskmaster VR appears on my YouTube homepage. The game itself appears as though actual care has been put into it. There's even an advertisement of Alex Horn himself advertising creative mode, a mode where you create your own tasks. There's also a creative mode, a mode where you create your own tasks. Going into the game, I have a few questions on how the game will function. If you don't know the show, each episode begins with a prize task. But what will that look like in the actual game? What will the episode progression look like? Will I see my competition completing tasks? Who is my competition? Will I complete tasks before or during the studio session? Today, the goal is simple. I will complete the first episode of the game while trying to gain an understanding of how everything functions. Afterward, I'll summarize my experience and tell you whether or not the Minecraft Taskmaster would recommend the VR Taskmaster. Oh my god, there's so many layers to this. Before entering the game itself, you are presented with the choice to opt in or out to data collection. Remember that there is a correct answer to this prompt. You're also taken through some calibration and movement settings, but the movement settings are very difficult to read, which is an issue in a game where reading is very important. Finally, you get to meet the little man himself, Alex Horn. He runs you through the basics and gives you the context you'll need to understand what you just got yourself into. Finally, he gives you a tutorial task. Place the Greg and Alex cutouts on the red circles in front of their dressing room doors. Drop the task card to start. The Greg one's over there. Let's go! This task is intentionally very simple as it lets you get the feel for moving around and interacting with objects. Once Greg and Alex are set on their stations, you're done! However, it's a bit difficult to neatly put the cutouts down, unlike what the experience might be with real-life cardboard cutouts. After the task, Alex invites you into the studio. On the way, I found some props that were oddly heavy to pick up, and I trapped myself behind the stanchions. But I eventually made it onto the stage to discover... 1 seat? 1? Where's everyone else? Yeah, I kinda expected to see something like the Wii series games, where I'd compete against some random generic AI players like Matt. I wouldn't be able to see what they've done, but they could act as some arbitrary rivals or competition. Instead, I'm competing alone in a campaign to earn as many points as possible. I'm not thrilled with the lack of competition, but I mean, it's fine, I guess. The most important part is the tasks.
And now a task where I get to be pampered for a change.
And they skip the prize task entirely, which in my eyes, it's not too big of a deal. Even in my Minecraft version of the show, prize tasks don't really work the best. I can't imagine what it would look like in a video game version with 0 other people competing for those prizes. We also start to see the structure of the game. The game is split into episodes, each containing 3 tasks, 2 location tasks, and 1 at the studio. The first proper task in this lineup is called Chimp's First Day in the Deli Shop. Make a sandwich for Alex using only the spatulas. Serve it on the silver tray with the correct plate and ring the bell when you're finished. The bell will become active after 2 minutes. The task will start when you're holding a spatula in each hand. Remember how so far it's been difficult to use objects? This task, just like what you have to do with the stove, cranks that up to 11 by forcing you to hold spatulas. Now, in a real-world situation, I would try to game the task by making a sandwich before picking up the spatulas, or just by serving Alex the 2 spatulas. However, neither of those are actually possible. Once you start the task, the game does not let you put down the spatulas. And most of the objects in the room can only be interacted with by the spatulas. Normally, I would say that's just good game design, but Taskmaster is a show where breaking the system and thinking outside the box should be applauded, not discouraged. Alas, I set off to make a sandwich, but ooh, if only I knew what ingredients I should use.
Ooh, really fancy.
Yeah, what do you fancy, Alex? Green plates, cucumber. One thing that we're going to see in these tasks is that, in a way, they feel linear. It feels like you're going on a set path towards a set destination. From a game design perspective, it makes sense why this is the case. After you go through the whole process of reading Alex's mind, painstakingly opening the dishwasher, picking up a raw egg with a spatula because video game logic, assembling the perfect sandwich, and hitting the buzzer, Greg and Alex need something to talk about. I imagine the developers tried to predict some of the outcomes that the players could end up with, and based the voice lines Greg and Alex say based on that. Personally, I received a history lesson about the invention of the sandwich.
When the Earl of Sandwich first invented the sandwich back in
1762.
1762, thank you, you irritating little nerd.
Unfortunately, not all of the lines I got perfectly fit with my performance, since I clearly made a sandwich. I just, might have forgotten the step where I served the sandwich to Alex.
Tut, tut, tut. What sandwich? Genuinely painful to watch, no points.
What is this? What?
Okay, what?
I made you a sandwich!
For the next task.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit peeved about that one, but I suppose we can move on. The second task is titled, Just Feed the Dog Some Melon. Look for clues to escape the garage. Find the can of dog food and put it in the dog bowl. You have 15 minutes. Your time starts now. Let's ball.
I've started the timer.
Surprise, surprise! It's another very linear task. I'd argue it's even more linear than the first. This task is structured like an escape room, where one piece of the puzzle opens the next, and all roads lead back to smashing a watermelon. It may appear overwhelming at first with all the papers on the wall, but these are very difficult to read. Thankfully, you don't actually need those, as all the answers lie in either the watermelons or the extra task sheets. There were a few times where I struggled to pick up an object or one of the many watermelons at the end of the task, but ultimately this one was kind of fun. I enjoyed smashing a bunch of watermelon at the end, but again, it was not a great feeling picking things up. It didn't feel as good as it could have. But here's the good news. I beat my entire competition and I got the full 5 points. I am so lonely here. I don't know if I can agree with Greg's judgment on this one though. I feel as though this task could have worked in a time attack sort of format where you get 5 points if you complete the task within 5 minutes, 4 points between 5 and 7, and so on and so forth, rather than 5 or 0 being the black and white in this one. I'm not complaining though, it's more of a nitpick if anything. The final task in each episode is the studio task, taking place at the Taskmaster studio. This one in particular is Tropical Skittles.
A skittle, of course, is British for bowling pin.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Get as much melon on the circle as possible without hitting the skittle. Skittles. The task ends when all 10 melons are thrown or all the skittles are knocked over. Time starts now. It's a simple task, really. One that doesn't allow for much wiggle room. I didn't get much watermelon on the target since I couldn't quite nail down the physics of throwing a watermelon either time the game had me doing it. Ultimately, I kept a few skittles up, got 2 points, and I ended episode 1 with 7 points. Rather than having a little celebration because I won the episode by default because I'm against no one, Greg just said goodbye and kicked me out. Afterward, I tried again to complete the sandwich task, but I just couldn't get it. In my first attempt, I was stuck trying to open the dishwasher, and on my second, I just began feeling motion sick and I had to stop playing. I can't. I'm sorry. So after my brief experience with Taskmaster VR, how do I feel about the game? I think the concept of this game is amazing. I love the idea of completing tasks in a virtual environment and getting personalized digs by Greg himself. However, we have to talk about the execution. I have a few issues with how this game feels to play. Picking up and interacting with objects doesn't feel intuitive at all. I would see myself struggling to interact with the objects around me, and that's not even talking about the use of the spatulas. That's with my hands. And the tasks themselves feel very linear. While I haven't experienced the full game, it seems as though the tasks I have played have an intended path to follow. I would love to see more tasks that allow for creative solutions, but I also understand how that could be difficult to create on a game design standpoint with Greg and Alex's voiceover. And the biggest thing of all, the game just doesn't feel good to play. The objects being difficult to interact with doesn't help, but I should not have to end my play session because I feel motion sick. This is a problem I usually don't have with VR games. This could be due to a combination of a lot of movement, which includes turning around, but also the graphics not looking great. Everything feels a bit pixelated, and there's a lot of text that's difficult to read. And maybe there's something in the settings that would fix all of my problems, but in my opinion, the best settings should be the default. I shouldn't have to go through a bunch of hoops just to make the game more playable. Ultimately, if you're a fan of Taskmaster who happens to own a VR headset, I'd recommend giving this game a shot. It's a neat little experience. But if you've never seen Taskmaster, or if you don't have a VR headset, I honestly cannot recommend this game. It pains me to say this, because I want to love this game so much, but again, it does not feel good to play. I'm sure the developers will continue working on this game based on community feedback, and I would love to see updates to make the game feel a bit better to play in terms of graphics and object interactions. Even the inclusion of some semblance of a multiplayer would be a huge upgrade to the experience, even if it's just something like the ability to 1v1 your friend Loignis on episode 4 task 2 specifically. At the end of the day, this is a game worth keeping your eye on, because I truly believe with some tweaking and updates, this game will be amazing. And now that this video is here and the masses can finally play the game, I'm sure creative mode will immediately be used to create some amazing things. But most importantly of all, the developers seem to care. It seems like this game is not a cash grab, but a way of showing their love for the show Taskmaster, and of course, their unending love for the Taskmaster. So what do I think? Is there anything else that a video about Taskmaster might need? A realistic intro! And we're demonetized.